with this topic, I briefly went over the seven Hermetic Principles and how to apply them in your daily life. This upload, I was asked specifically to go over the Hermetic Principles in depth. So today I'll be reading them in depth from the Kabbalion book. And I'll leave a link for it in the description and in the comments. So there's a free resource that I use to read a lot of these books. I'm also going to talk today about pretty much how we got here, in my opinion. Of course, this is all theory. I have no clearly way of knowing if this is the possible, but I feel that it makes a lot of sense. So let me go back to way back when. So pre-Jesus times, they taught people these Hermetic principles regularly. There was about 12 years unaccounted for in Jesus' life that they've left out of the current Bibles and teaching. These 12 years Jesus spent studying with Buddhists, and he spent in Egypt studying the tablets of Thoth. And if you remember who Thoth is, that's actually Hermes Trismegistus. And that's a fun thing to say. But it's the same guy. Jesus spent this time learning with Buddhists and learning the the 7 principles that are the building blocks of the 12 universal laws, which will be the next thing we cover. So in modern times, it is so dangerous to our natural bodies, our physical bodies, the constant stimuli we allow ourselves to be immersed in, and it sets us up for failure. It's credited to no other than automobile titan Henry Ford, who limited work hours in the 1920s, but gave us the 9-to-5 model. If you think about it, we've all become institutionalized. School, 7 a.m. to 3 or 8 a.m. to 4, work 9 to 5, 2 p.m. to 10, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Preschool prepares us to sit down, look forward, mimic the lessons, recite this, write that, all to practice for the big weekly test. Rinse and repeat. If children learn differently, their brain is hijacked by wardens of the institution, aka school teachers, to direct their quality of knowledge and learning capabilities. Learn this, but not this. Study. Study this, but not study this. Prepare for this, but not this. So what does study even mean? It means mimic this instruction, memorize it all, to pass this institution's way to measure just how well they can warp our youth. So no parent that I've ever met actually sits down and reads, or even requests for that matter, each school's curriculum, that they're going to actually sit down and teach your child. So just what skills are they preparing your child for in adulthood? Because that's what they, claim to be a part of. Now I think you're starting to see where I'm going with this. No institution can prepare a child for adulthood. And that is by design. It is an institution. If you take a second and Google the definition for yourself, an established organization or corporation, such as a bank or university, especially of a public character, financial institutions, or a facility or establishment in which people, such as the sick or needy, live and receive care, typically in a confined setting and often without individual consent. So let's unpack all of that, break it down, and go over it piece by piece. An established organization. So the definition of organization, number one, an organized body of people with a particular purpose, especially a business, society, association, etc. Or number two, corporation. A corporation is an organization, usually a group of people or a company, authorized by the state to act as a single entity and recognized as such in law for certain purposes. A corporation is a business entity that is owned by its shareholders who elect a board of directors to oversee the organization's activities. The corporation is liable for the actions and finances of the business. The shareholders are not. Such as a bank or university. And this is just going back, unpacking the full definition of organization. So a bank is an organization that accepts customer cash deposits and then provides financial services like bank accounts, loans, share trading accounts, mutual funds, etc. Now we're going to break down the school. A school being a place where formal education takes place. It can be said to be an organization. This means that as a social system comprising of a group of people that interact together to achieve both school and individual goals. Even further, a social system is the pattern network of relationships constituting a coherent whole that exists between individuals, groups, and institutions. It is the formal structure of role and status that can form in a small, stable group. Do you see the alarming pattern I'm getting at? Let's keep breaking it down. So back to the definition. We go right into especially of a public character. And a public character is anyone who is in frequent contact with a wide circle of people and who is sufficiently entrusted to make himself a public character. Schools, banks, hospitals, etc. A facility or establishment in which people, such as the sick or needy, live and receive care, typically in a confined setting and often without individual consent. So this is the last part of the definition of organization. Now we are talking about hospitals, mental hospitals, drug rehabs, and prisons. See how counterintuitive this all is? You see now the crux of our problems in society. So this is all simple Google searches and just kind of theories and thoughts that I've put together. So I went ahead and looked up why were schools first started. So if you type that in Google specifically, as I said, you will come up with a whole host of answers. So the first one that I come up with was preparing people for democratic citizenship was a major reason for a creation of public schools. Now this is some Europe, it's like EU stuff, but still, it's worldwide, and this is a worldwide issue. All of the issues that we have in Western civilization, that's worldwide. That's Europe. That's, I think that's even breaking into India, even though that's typically considered Eastern. So, like I mentioned, this is Europe specifically, but it was the first Google search that popped up here. But it's democracy, and democracy is part of America too. Europe just doesn't have a constitution, so they go more with human rights. And this is over like dignity, education, human rights. It's essentially training people how to be a good citizen. And I'll let you come up with your own conclusions on that one. So the second search that popped up on when I typed in why were schools first started. So number 2 was responsible for education. People soon figured out that it would be easier and more efficient to have a small group of adults teach a large group of children. Now, the third thing that came up was the primary function of schools at this time was to teach reading so that children learn to read from the Bible. And you can go into further research if you want. I just wanted to show you an example. So number 4, the fourth thing that popped up was Horace Mann. He lived 1796 to 1859. He created the school system. He was known as the father of American education. So he was a major force behind establishing unified school systems, worked to establish a varied curriculum that excluded sectarian instruction. So that's religious instruction. Now, you'll see where this all ties in and why I actually went through all of this to show you the parallels. So the fifth thing that popped up was, what was the main purpose of schooling? And it says, therefore, the purpose of school must be to give the student the skills to get a job. This means that education is a way for anyone to support him or herself and economically contribute to society. Some of these skills are taught in many of the basic classes: reading, writing, math. Now y'all see where it's all tying in and how it's not really a theory, in my opinion. It's pretty much right in front of our faces. So being educated means you are a good citizen, pretty much, when you're looking at it from this light. So why are educated or intellectual people not successful and happy? If you think about it, from extreme poverty to the opposite end of the wealth spectrum, all the way to the 1%, which is the richest people, from one end of the world to the other, rich and poor alike, society has the exact same problems. Drugs, abuse, and in that abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, self-esteem issues, self-worth issues, etc. So why? Rich people, educated people, all seem to follow societal norms, like manners. They even take etiquette classes, receive special education, boarding schools, go to Ivy League colleges. So why do they have these problems? Because society since the 1800s began to institutionalize its citizens. Every facet of society, if you were born into slavery, how would you know you were a slave? If you think about it, since the Industrial Revolution and even further back, but I'm using this as an example because most people know about the Industrial Revolution. Innovation allowed more and more production. Machines replaced 2 humans, then 3, then 10, then 100. Along with these innovations, wealth disparity seemingly decreased. And I say seemingly for a reason. The Industrial Revolution created a new middle class along with the working class. This middle class owned and operated the new factories, mines, railroads, along with other industries. This increased the wealth in the globe, pretty much, and then began an increase in the luxuries of their lifestyle. As far back as I can remember growing up, the common thought in my young mind was work hard, put your time into a company, and then you can retire comfortably. That very thought is institutionalized slavery. Slave to the grind, with the grind meaning your job. Now, as I've demonstrated to you through this video, the very definition of institution comprises every stage of human development from birth. At a hospital's an institution. Daycare, institution. Pre-kindergarten, institution. Kindergarten, institution. 1st through 5th grade, institution. 6th through 9th grade, institution. 9th through 12th grade, institution. 12th grade and beyond, if you choose to be in a school, that is an institution. They even call it institution of higher learning. Career, that's an institution. Or prison, That's an institution. Mental hospital, institution. Drug rehab, when your little brain snaps because no matter what you do, you're unhappy. Institution. Old people home, institution. Now, this is pretty funny, and you'll have to look this up on your own. But even when they put you in the grave or cremate you, it's called the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management. I shit you not. This was actually founded in 1930. And funny, since that was the time frame of who? Henry Ford. Now that I also think of it, preconception. So if you need a fertility clinic, that's also an institution. So, I mean, we are completely institutionalized as a society from in vitro to in the ground. This institutionalized lifestyle is absolutely meaningless to our souls, which is why we have so many issues facing society. Even if we graduate with a doctorate, the pressure, the debt, etc., it's crippling. Even if we get our dream job, even if we get our dream wedding, etc., there are only a handful of humans alive today that are fulfilling their soul's purpose. Western society specifically is so morally bankrupt. That stimuli is the only thing that is holding the society as we know together. Each generation loses more and more of the value of the human life, and by design. There are a group of nameless, faceless globalists that none of us will ever see, but they alone dictate the direction of Western civilization. So each institution, like a well-oiled machine, pushes speed, efficiency, and society pushes stimuli. Bright colors, flashing signs, neon lights, all designed to grab our attention and keep us distracted from that nagging feeling inside. And this is by design. I truly believe my purpose on this earth in this lifetime is to be an initiate. Thousands of years ago, these select few were chosen, but today none of this exists. Society is in shambles, so I chose myself to spread this message. After everything that I've been through, after everything that led me here to this, it's just, I feel destined to do it. And not in a weird way. I just want to spread this message. So our individual purpose on this, in this incarnation, varies from soul to soul, but overall our purpose is to merge our three-dimensional selves with our higher selves. This set of principles is step one. If you can learn how to master these, you will become more than anything you've ever thought possible. Your 3D self is shackled in place, held captive by your mind, your ego, and the materialistic drive ingrained in you from birth. And like I mentioned, they got these seemingly wealthier people used to the luxuries of life. When they took us off the gold standard, they gave us credit. And what did they do? They took it all away with the Great Depression. This is all by design. It's to keep us trapped in this materialistic sense, to keep us wanting bigger TVs, bigger cars, like those things are going to make us happy, and they never will. So if you listen to these principles, maybe write them down, read them out loud. And like I said, I'll put the link for these. Reread them. Reread them as many times as it takes. And you can go back to my first upload to kind of see where to apply them, how to apply them. Because, this is it's black and white. It's a lot of old terminology. And if you're not very advanced in some of these terms, I would have you pull this up, read it. It's no cost. It's a free site that you can pull it up and read it on. Look up the word if you don't know it. I will cover soon the real meaning of energy, the real meaning of matter, the real meaning of all that going forward. But this is pretty much the foundation of it all, so I just wanted to take it slow. And each time you listen to this, you will get a different meaning. Something new will stand up to you. And little by little, you will learn to unchain yourself from this three-dimensional prison. Because we're realistically in one. We were born in one. And if we don't do something to alter the course that society has destined for us, we will die in one. And as I showed you, you will die. And the person that cremates you came from an institution and belongs to an institution of crematoriums. Even though freedom isn't free, this fight, it's worth it. Just that saying, it's so relevant about so many things. And when you put it into the spiritual sense, freedom is absolutely not free. We have to go for it. But this fight is not fought physically. This fight is fought in your mind. And once you break free in your mind, you'll be free forever. For your soul's advancement in the universe, because we are immortal. Energy never dies. It only transforms. Every thought builds your physical reality. Energy contains memory. Constant stimuli distorts your reality because it keeps your mind preoccupied on things that don't matter or things that keep you chained in this material world. It becomes an addiction because the frequency inside of you is so low. The frequency from this living this institutional life keeps you trapped in this low frequency. And then all you feel is the negative host of emotions. You don't actually elevate your frequency unless you can break free from this institutional behavior. This distortion will keep you trapped here. Every dream you've ever envisioned for yourself, you will receive that plus more than you ever thought possible. So what I'm going to do is read exactly from the Kybalion. And this will give you a broader sense of each principle. After this upload, I will be moving on to the 12 universal laws, just like we did with the first upload. Just briefly go over them, and then if you want me to go more in depth, then I will. But there's a lot more concepts I want to cover when we move to the universal laws, like what energy really means, what matter really means, because there's a lot of theories that I'm going to break down when it comes to the universal laws that really will change your outlook on just about everything. The Seven Hermetic Principles, Chapter 2. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The 7 Hermetic Principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. 7. The principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. 1. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, or as I call it, the 3D. The phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all of the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote, long ages ago, "He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below, as below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation. On the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe, it is an universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration from the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter. All is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity, that it is practically at rest, just as rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose state depends on vibrations, and even onto the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle, with the appropriate formulas, enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The masters who apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. Principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. It explains that in everything there are two poles, or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, hot and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing, the differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There's no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing, and that same thing, which manifests as heat and cold, is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat, and the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What's the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states apparently totally different. And yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither, and all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you will but think a moment, and more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermeticists. It is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary, rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, in your own case and that of others, and you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas, good and evil, are but the poles of the same thing. And the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. The principle of rhythm. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide. Between the two poles, which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago, there is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending on the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it, instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. The principle of cause and effect. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, They become causers instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves. Heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played, and move about by other wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. The principle of gender. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle, within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains also the male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices, which are taught under fanciful titles, and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of fallacism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. So I hope you enjoyed my theory on what's going on in the world and a more in-depth look at each of the Hermetic principles. In conclusion, I'd like to add, institutions can only teach you how to function as a good citizen, worker, robot. But never once do they build you a healthy foundation for spiritual development and growth, nor give you a clue on how to achieve real knowledge or where to even start to obtain it. This is by design. Free thinking and more than basic motor function skills cripple their perfect citizen system. And right now, to enact change, it will take us that are older, because we can function enough to begin to teach our children these principles while allowing them to grow up in this system and showing them how to walk the fine line. That way, when it's time for their children to be born, we will have already laid the foundation between both worlds, new and old. We sacrificed autonomy and production for our spiritual growth and knowledge of the earth. We have to go back and relearn nature's laws and principles if we want to see our great-grandchildren be the best generation Mother Earth has ever had. Everything at one time was impossible until an initiate changed the world forever.